Hi friends, it's Sleepy, and I'm going to summarize the last 28 videos in 20 minutes. So let's do our 1320s decades recap. In 1320, we started the new decade with our happily married heir, William Turner, and his supposedly unflirty wife, Edith, who actually flirted with everyone in the household. And it wasn't the only strange happening. Edward was snatched away by social services for the first time. Later, we roll for Robert's elder life stage and learn he would only live for 3 more years. But I wasn't panicking yet, since William was already old enough to be head of the family. At Joseph Turner's farm, Joseph and Tabitha realize that they're having trouble conceiving 2 years into their marriage, and Tabitha starts to envy Anne, who is pregnant for the second time with Miles. At her second son's ranch, John seeks out Constance Baker for her hand in marriage. Now that he was in charge of a small ranch and employed by the landlord, he was ready to start a family. Constance had been living in his mind rent-free ever since he and William met her last year. We finished the year learning that Edith is pregnant with our heir's first child. Will Edith and Anne beat our 7-year no-baby streak? In 1321, we battled a bug infestation in the side cabin where William and Edith lived. Edith gave birth to William's first son and named him Admin. Unfortunately, he did not survive labor and delivery due to complications. 1321 is also the year we meet the landlord, Lord Valus, and his family. Lord Valus hosts a feast for the needy to celebrate coming out of the famine and to nourish his subjects. We are briefly introduced to the infamous Lord Kame, Valus's younger brother, who was 19 years his junior. Lord Kame has a reputation for harassing young female staff, causing a high turnover rate. While we checked on Magdalene, who was alone with Kame, Edward was snatched away for a second time. While at the feast, we discovered that Tabitha is finally with child. Back at the Turner Vincent farm, we prepare for the winter. Magdalene was gushing about the castle for days after the feast. She never really felt comfortable back at home since leaving Joseph's farm and actually having to work. Robert received a message from the castle requiring him to spare Magdalene and his youngest son. Everyone was worried for Magdalene, but she saw no reason for concern. At the Tullers, Anne gives birth to her second baby with Miles, and he survives, breaking our 7-year no-baby curse. They named him Rob as a tribute to Anne's beloved uncle Robert. About 6 months after the feast, Magdalene and Edward moved to the landlord's castle to begin working. Magdalene was stationed with the servants under Hazel, the head housekeeper, and Edward became an assistant to the new gamekeeper, Sam Godwin. Hazel's daughter Maeve was tasked with showing Magdalene the ropes, and Hazel wasted no time warning Magdalene about bringing Lord Kame his warm milk. We finished the year with another successful birth. Tabitha gives birth to Joseph's first son, whom they named Reggie. We also learn that William and Edith are expecting their second child. In 1322, at the Turner Ranch, John and Connie experienced the loss of their first child, Henrietta, who they named after John's deceased little brother, Henry, who we lost in the famine. At the castle, Magdalene learns to cook, clean, and dance, and works her first banquet with Maeve. While it was nerve-wracking having to perform for noble guests, Magdalene enjoyed the thrill. At our heir's home, Edith gives birth to twins, Poppy and Briar. Unfortunately, Poppy did not survive into infancy, failing to thrive in the cold winter. We close the year back at the castle. Magdalene has learned how to dance and entertain excellently, and even enjoys castle revelries. A tipsy Lord Kame finds a drunk Magdalene on the balcony alone. He surprises himself when he chooses to leave her untouched and still innocent. In 1323, John and Constance have their first son and surviving child. They named him Tompkin after his parental grandpa, Thomas Turner, our founding father. At Christmas dinner at the heir's house, Marjorie passes up on Edith's older brother Ned as a potential suitor. Instead, she fancies Sam, the castle gamekeeper, who escorted Magdalene and Edward back home to the farm for the holiday. They really hit it off. In the middle of the night, Robert snuck outside while feeling strange and awful. He felt a sense of impending doom and thought of all of the pain and happiness in his life. Within moments, he passed away quietly and alone under the stars, not wanting to bother the love of his life who was asleep. After Robert's passing, William takes on caring for the farm and home and makes some upgrades to the floors and walls. We also learn that Edith is pregnant for the third time and she's scared to death. At the castle, Magdalene's role is elevated above the worst of the servant duties. She's now dressed in proper clothing and sleeping in a beautiful bedchamber, living a life of comfort that she always wanted. King dotes a lot of attention on her and teaches her how to play cards and chess. We finished the year with Anne giving birth to her third child with Miles, and second living, a girl they named Raven. In 1324, after a very stressful pregnancy, Edith gave birth very prematurely to a healthy baby boy they named Hawthorne, our Generation 3 heir. He beat 50-50 odds of dying. Back at the farm, Sam comes to ask Marjorie for her hand in marriage, with the family's blessing. William isn't crazy about another sibling at the castle, but Sam is a terrific guy to his sister. Simultaneously, Edith and William enter a rough patch in their marriage with a difficult family dynamic. It appeared to be from differing sentiments about Edith's pregnancies. At the Turner Ranch, John and Connie are expecting their third child, and Tompkin successfully ages up to a toddler. And at the castle, Edward ages up to a striking teen that looks just like Thomas and Mary, perfectly blended together. In 1325, at Joseph Turner's farm, Rebecca ages up to a gorgeous teen, and Raventeller lives on to be a toddler. At our heir's house, Edith is surprised with another unwanted pregnancy, and the emotional divide with William continues. At the Turner Ranch, Connie gives birth to twin girls. They named them Ellen and Nora after John's deceased little sister, Eleanor, who passed away before the start of my series. Unfortunately, Nora did not survive her infant role and passed away in the dead of winter, failing to thrive. At the castle, Lord Kane feels that since he set Magdalene up with her fancy room, he deserves to visit her there at night. Magdalene agrees, having been drawn to Lord Kane for years now, and officially becomes his mistress. Marjorie and Magdalene age up to young adults, and we get a terrible shock learning that Magdalene is infertile. Meanwhile, Marjorie gives birth to Samson, her and Sam's first baby, but he dies in infancy. But we end the year on a good note, with Edith successfully giving birth to her and William's third surviving child, a son named Forrest. In 1326, we venture out in the village with Elizabeth as she sells some of the Turner Vincent harvest. While in the center of town, Elizabeth met Sir Camden and Sir Ryland from the Knights Guild. Back at home, we all can't believe Edith is expecting again. In the following weeks, Elizabeth lies to her family that she is visiting Marjorie at the castle and sneaks off to a tavern at the near edge of a neighboring town. She arranged to meet Sir Camden there, and he played the evening cool and reserved. Elizabeth didn't feel too confident about his feelings for her. In our side households, we learn that Tabitha and Connie are both expecting this year. At the castle, Lord Valus kicked Magdalene out of her private bedchambers and banned Lord Game from giving his mistress any further elevation. This is also when we learn that Lord Valus is having an affair with Hazel. Pot, meet, kettle. At the Joseph Turner farm, Tabitha goes into labor with Joseph's fifth child. The result was the most devastating night in UDC. Despite Joseph's pleads, Tabitha and baby Regina both die in childbirth, leaving Joseph a widower for a second time and having to find a wife to help raise his children again. In the several weeks since the Fantasy Tavern, Elizabeth and Sir Ryland spend more time getting to know each other. Elizabeth believes Sir Ryland is courting her, and he comes to call on her at the farm often. He whispered sweet nothings and made grand promises and got our girl behind the barn. Elizabeth was so sure Sir Ryland would propose marriage, but he did not. Before we close the year out, we are faced with even more tragedy, as Edith experiences a third trimester pregnancy loss. It was awful for Edith and the family. She thankfully recovered fully. We rode out the last of 1326 with another castle party. Lord Valus invited several noble women to be Lord Kame's suitors. Valus was putting pressure on Kame to marry and to do his duty of making an heir. We meet 3 beautiful women, and one of them will be the future Lady Henford. During the revels, our gallant Sir Ryland catches on fire and all the drama commences in the next year. In 1327, the weeks following the castle party, Sir Camden calls upon Elizabeth at the farm. Camden is meant to tell Elizabeth about Ryland's injuries from the fire, but he makes the executive decision to sow doubt instead. Camden suspects correctly that Sir Ryland was never going to propose to Elizabeth before he became injured. Elizabeth lets herself get swept up in Camden's attentions, thinking she would need him to save her from unwed pregnancy disgrace. But when he proposed, Elizabeth decided she still needed closure with Sir Ryland. The love triangle met at the village church, and Sir Ryland gave weak excuses for ghosting before the castle banquet and made judgmental accusations at Elizabeth. Things got pretty heated and confusing, so Elizabeth told both men to bug off. Sir Ryland left with his pride pricked, but Sir Camden stayed back and held a clearly distressed and ill Elizabeth. Elizabeth ended up losing her pregnancy to a miscarriage. Strangely, in the background during this ordeal was where Edward met Elise for the first time. At the Tellers, Miles ages up to an adult, and we learn that he will live until the age of 53. That is if a very pregnant Anne doesn't kill him first, because the child of Miles's one-night stand at a Windenburg brothel was dropped off at their door. Elise Rose joins the family at the precocious age of 13. A short month later, Anne successfully gives birth to the third child, a boy named Reese. Afterwards, the couple agrees to natural birth control methods to prevent more pregnancies, and immediately fail. Off camera, John and Constance welcome their third living child as well, a girl named Jill. We finished the year checking in with Joseph Turner, who decided not to take another wife and seeks out to employ a nursemaid instead. Personally, I think his daughter Rosalind aged up to look so much like his first wife Shanna that he couldn't imagine taking on another relationship. About this time, though, I realized that Mary and Joseph were without partners for the first time. Joseph attempted to flirt, but it never went anywhere. In 1328, at the castle, Lord Valus helps Lord Kame out and chooses his bride for him, and he chooses Lady Mila, who immediately set her eyes on the young Edward as soon as she entered the banquet hall. Kame marries Mila in a private ceremony so the couple would not have to wait long. Perhaps not shockingly, Kame heads straight to Magdalen after the wedding to serenade and woohoo her before he even bothers to consummate his marriage. While I rectify that situation, we have our minds blown to find out that Magdalen is pregnant with Kame's miracle baby. In Windenburg, our rejected knights confronted each other over their frustrated and hurt feelings. 2 polite punches are thrown and the men swear off each other. Sir Camden returns to our heir's house to apologize to Elizabeth and declares his love for her. Elizabeth couldn't believe that Sir Camden didn't give up on her, and when he proposes, she accepts. They get married in the village church with all the Henford and Bagley Turners present, including a once again pregnant Edith. And Elizabeth goes off into the Tartossan sunset to tend Sir Camden's property and to live happily ever after. At the Tellers, Miles seems to be coming down with something due to the stress of another child on the way. Anne gives birth to their 4th surviving child, a girl named Aliena. breaking the R-name tradition to help Elise feel more a part of the family. Speaking of Elise, we discovered that she thinks Edward is extremely attractive, but she does not like him. Back at the castle, we learned that Mila is expecting Lord Kame's first legitimate child, but Mila has felt lonely since moving to the castle, especially with knowing Lord Kame has got a mistress pregnant. Lord Valus was not happy with the news of Magdalen's pregnancy. The brothers fight over Magdalen's status and living arrangements, as Kame wants to move her out of the servants' quarters again. Due to all the stress, Magdalen suffers from pregnancy complications and gives birth prematurely. While Mom was fine, baby girl Vera had to overcome a 50% chance of dying, and she beat the odds. While dealing with shenanigans at a nearby village festival, Lord Kame returned home to find that Lord Valus had Magdalen and baby Vera escorted off the property and sent away. Kame was furious and went straight to his brother's chamber to confront him. They have a not-so-deadly sword fight and declare themselves enemies. While they are both furious with each other, neither can take the other's life so easily. Shortly after that, we find that Lord Valus is suffering from some sort of illness and he begins to weaken. We close out the year with Mila successfully giving birth to a baby girl named Katerine. Everyone feels a little let down as they were all hoping for a boy first. This seemingly causes Mila to feel less bonded to her baby, and we see her seek companionship from the now 18-year-old Edward. And the Turners all collectively sigh to learn that Magdalen and Vera are with her sister Elizabeth in her Tartosan manor, where they are currently safe, though Lord Kame promises to bring her back to the castle someday. In our final year of the decade, we pop back in to check on John's ranch. His eldest Tompkin ages up to a child, and he'll be mischievous, and the family is beautiful and thriving. At our heir's house, Edith successfully gives birth to baby Rosemary. The happy couple were so overcome with appreciation and love that they immediately woohooed. They realized the error they may have made and agreed to natural forms of birth control from then on. We end the decade not yet knowing if Edith is pregnant again. Unfortunately, tragedy struck on the last day of the year when Rosemary fails her infant role and dies from a suffocation accident, ending our good luck baby streak and making this the third child that our heirs have lost. Joseph Turner and crew end the decade contemplating the future as Rebecca and Elise are of marrying age. We all agreed that Joseph would make methodical choices for his daughters, while Miles most likely has not even realized his eldest daughter would be of age now. We conclude the decade back at the castle. Marjorie and Sam finally have another baby, and it's a healthy baby boy named Sammy, who takes right after his mom in looks. Lord Valus continues to weaken from illness and to feud with his brother Kame. Well, Kame seems lost without Magdalen at the castle, and he spends an adorable amount of time with his daughter Katerine. But notably, he does not go to his wife Mila for company. While still lingering at the castle, we noticed that once again, Mila and Edward were autonomously conversing with each other. Only this time, it crossed the line to an impromptu woohoo in the grand hall. And somehow they were not caught. Only time will tell if everything will be okay for Mila. That's it, friends. I hope you stay tuned for all the babes that died and what they would have looked like, and our adults who died, to some sad music. I want to thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the 1330s. Take care.